Simcha, celebration, Simcha, Simcha, celebration of life.
Hi from me, Jared Epstein, and welcome to another episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. Rabbi Mendel Liberow is a well-known rabbi in the Joburg Jewish community. He takes us through his journey as one of the first COVID-19 patients in the country, from diagnosis before lockdown even began to his recovery and how his faith pulled him through.
I actually came from overseas in the beginning of March. I was there, spent a couple of days overseas. I didn't feel that well initially, but attributed to a long flight. And it was towards the end of that week where, I'm trying to think which symptoms it was, but I was feeling tired and a little bit quite sick. On the Sunday afterwards, I went to be self-tested. And at that time, not all hospitals were doing testing. All I was told was, we can't do it, go to another place. Eventually, on that Sunday, I went to 3 places where I was eventually taken in and tested. And the test came back as positive. Was quite a shock to me at the time. The first thought that came to mind was, this is all from God. And basically put your faith into God and strengthen that faith and accept that God does everything for a reason and for the good and betterment of a person. And that basically, I would say that message kept me going. That 4-week adventure was one never to be forgotten. I can tell you that about 2.5 weeks of those 4 weeks, I was in a different world, in a different space. I was on a respirator and sedated, and I knew nothing of what was going around me. Obviously, for my betterment and to help in my recovery of the disease, of the sickness and the virus. So those 2.5 weeks I can't recall. I will say, however, that I was having not dreams or illusions or things happening around me. I was floating around from one country to another. I thought my oldest child was with me, or behind the ward, and it gave me some kind of a feeling of comfort and assurance, but it turned out he wasn't there, at least not physically. From my family's perspective, I thought there was tremendous concern and obviously worry on one hand. At the same time, they were in constant contact with the doctors and the staff, so they were getting reports all the time, updates, so they knew what was going on, even in those difficult times when there were some certainly again, not known to me at the time, but worrying moments. They again, being, as I said, Jewish, religious, and committed, it gave them tremendous support and call it comfort, that despite the challenges, we'll get through it. And if I may add at this point as well, as religious people, as Jewish people, when we are faced with a challenge or some kind of a test or trial, we obviously turn to God, and we turn to God in prayer, not just strengthening our faith, but also expressing it in a very real way. So I'll make mention, in addition to prayers in the general term that were done by my family and friends and overseas as well, both local and overseas. At the same time, there's a book of the Holy Scriptures called the Book of Psalms, Tehillim in Hebrew. It comprises of 150 chapters, and it's known to Jewish people and many people of other faiths as well. The Book of Psalms has tremendous powers of comfort and consolation, powers of giving reassurance and reconnecting to God, that the Psalms was actually given out to be said by the local Jewish community and again, by the Jewish community overseas as well. And it was said to me later, again, I wasn't in a state to get that report, but the Psalms were being said 24/7, literally, throughout the night. I mean, 3, 4, 5 a.m. and during the day, 24 hours, people undertook to say segments of the Book of Psalms. It was finished once, it went to second and the third time. So the power of Psalms, that united power of Psalms, the power of literally hundreds of people all over the world saying words from Psalms, certainly sent the message up to God in the heavens, and which brought the blessing down. So that, again, when I heard, even when I came through off the machines, I was still in need of a great of healing. But then being told and being assured that people are praying for me and on my behalf gave me that boost of feeling I'm not alone. And God is obviously with all of us, but the power of people together sharing like one big family, not in the physical sense, but as one family, we're caring and concerning for each other, which will eventually bring down the full healing. The world is like a global village. We're all together, we hear, we see about each other. So you hear news reports, you see news reports, and you see pictures of people coming home out of the ambulances, of the wheelchairs, etc. And you say, thank God, I'm one of those people, the fortunate people who was able and unable to function properly, and thank God again with no side effects, which many people are still recovering, and though they might not be hospitalized, but they've still got many issues that they still have to deal with. We're all in a big rush to get back to normal. We're all affected directly or indirectly by the lockdown and restrictions and all the other challenges that we face with. We should use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to see what the norm that was so normal to us and so important to us months ago, how things have now changed. Our value system has now changed. Things that were so important that we weren't willing to compromise or to negotiate about, etc. All of a sudden, because we haven't got the chance to go back that way, so we've somehow got to realign and reassess who we are, what we are, where we are, what our true purpose in this life is all about, why we're on this world, etc. It only takes one individual to make that change in his or her life, which will impact not just he or herself and their family and their community and their city and their country, but can infect the entire world. Think about destruction, how one person's individual act can cause havoc on the world, and translate back, or reverse it rather, to the positive message that one individual's good deed, one individual's good act can be hopefully that final act to bring peace, stability, and to bring the Messiah to this world, where ultimately it will be the perfect world. No war and no suffering and no disease and no sickness, but a world where all of us, again, both the Jewish people and every other religion as well, to serve one God.
Documenting stories and faces in history plays a vital role in how we move forward as society and share stories. The Jewish Digital Archive Project has been doing exactly that. We chat to the team about the process of digitizing Jewish family stories and how it has evolved from when they first started.
My father, Mendel Kaplan, started the Kaplan Center in 1980, and he bought the Sammy Marks collection. And that formed the basis of the library and the archive, which consequently became the holding space of communal records and documents. And I have a background in documentary filmmaking. So for me, I was very interested in the visual record and excited about what would come out about Jewish life in South Africa through collecting photographs and film.
The museum works very closely with the Kaplan Center for Jewish Studies at UCT. A project that was initially started, known as JDAP, or what we call JDAP, which stands for the Jewish Digital Archive Project, was started there as an attempt to capture the social history of Jewish life in South Africa. As the project evolved, it became to the realization that it was actually more suited to the museum than to the university archives. And we continued along those lines. What became apparent quite early on is that there's this rich history from your ancestry to your genealogy to your family stories that was there. And unfortunately, the museum doesn't have the physical space or the correct structures in place to store this type of thing, which led us to the digital world.
It was an organic project that our intentions were there, but we needed to find the right system that would be put in place. And it was when we spoke to the archive and public culture platform at UCT, who work with Canadian-based software called Atom, which stands for Access to Memory, which is a multilingual repository and has archival software and archival processes. That is when our systems changed, and we started moving all our material into Excel spreadsheets, into those Atom-based principles.
The role of digital archivist mirrors the role of physical archivist, in that you process collections, which just means preparing what could be photographs, documents, correspondence, in some cases film, and it's preparing those collections to be easily accessible to the public.
My job with the digital archive is to take a large collection of videos that were given by the community and go through them and identify what's happening in them, see what kind of clothes they're wearing, what cars are being driven, where it's taking place. And through that, I try and identify basically when it is happening, and I catalog that and I categorize that and put it all available to be uploaded online.
I was excited about the fact that the Jewish community happened to have a lot of cameras and films in the early years. And so a lot of South African history in general could be found in the private collections of Jewish homes.
I would literally go from house to house, sitting with families and individuals who wanted to contribute to the archive, going through their photographs, hearing their stories, conducting oral history interviews, and then bringing it back.
What makes this archive so special is how diverse it is, how much is included in it in terms of the experience of the full Jewish history and progression in South Africa.
The beautiful thing about the project is that you can see reoccurring themes over time. So for example, you can see traditional family Shabbat dinners. You can see rituals like reading, family bonding, family holidays, dancing, recreation, economic aspects. You can see similarities, but you can also plot the changes over time. And that for me is continually interesting, the way someone dressed 20 years ago to how they did today and how it stays the same and changes at the same time.
What I do is I have up on one screen the old archive footage. So I'm seeing videos of South African Jews, say, on the beach or traveling or coming back from war. And what I like to do is I usually have videos open next to it showing life in the 1950s, such as from YouTube. And I try and match up what I can see on YouTube and what I can see in these videos, trying to see where there are similar clothes, where there's similar cars, where there's similar ways that people are talking. That way I kind of identify where and when these things are taking place.
We are hoping that going forward, the families that have collections can describe them, can add places and names and dates and any anecdotal material. You know, this was my uncle and we called him by this nickname, you know, and this was our early family home and this was our dog and that kind of thing. You know, the more personal information people can add, the better, so that we can, to the best of our abilities, put up collections that have all this rich information.
We were approached randomly by a couple who had found an orange box of letters at the Milnerton market for 30 Rand. And they turned out to be the letters of Arnold Finkelstein, a fashion designer in the 1950s in South Africa. And we scanned them all in, and as a result, brought together a whole lot of family members who were very moved by this discovery. It was an exchange between him and his parents while he was studying overseas, and quite interesting, emotive letters, and extremely valuable, of course.
I was watching film that we just come across from a family collection, and it was during the Second World War. There was a parade of tanks and other armament. And I was just watching it and thinking, this is fantastic historic material for anybody who's interested in South African history. And then I had to stop the video to see that there was a sign on one of the tanks that said, donated by the Union of Jewish Women. I had no idea that the Union of Jewish Women was in so many facets of South African life, and that they had put their money and their efforts into the war to support the South African troops at the time who were fighting with the Allies overseas.
As a young Jewish person, it's made me appreciate kind of our history in South Africa, seeing how integrated we were, everything from soldiers to bankers to being part of the vineyard parades through Stellenbosch. All of these things made me appreciate just how part of South Africa our history has been and how widespread Jews used to be in the community of South Africa.
And this is now an accessible online South African Jewish archive that people are able to not only research their own ancestral history and look for family contents or the communities that they came from, but also add their own content. So, and that's something that's quite important to us, is that it gives South African Jewish families and people and organizations the opportunity to create an archive of their content, which we will look after and make sure that it is available to future generations, that it's kept online under best practices.
Look, I'm very passionate about this project. I started it because I honestly believe in it. I don't want people's lives to be lost into history when we're in an age where we can preserve stories, and we can preserve stories without a master narrative. It's no longer one person, the victor, who tells the story. It is now everybody who has the opportunity to tell their own story. And of course, what happens is that their story can then be contested by somebody else who was there at the time. So it doesn't undermine the story, but it allows for a multiplicity of narratives to coexist. And that is our aim. That's where we're going. And we'd love the help of the community to get there.
Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein has been guiding us through modern-day ethics, with references to the ancient wisdom of ethics of our Father. Today, he focuses on the topic of establishing students and sharing knowledge.
Let me ask you a question. What is great leadership all about? And you may say, well, that question isn't relevant to most people, because most people are not involved in some sort of official leadership position. But actually, our sages teach us that in the truest sense of the word, we are all leaders. We are all called upon to make a difference in the world. It's actually a statement from Pirkei Avot, from Ethics of the Fathers, and it says, establish many students. And it's talking about the mitzvah to teach Torah, to share God's wisdom with as many people as possible. But that idea is an idea which can apply to many aspects of life, because what it's really saying is that we must all take responsibility to influence for the good the people around us. So it's not just, well, you have those in leadership positions and you have leaders and followers. We all can be leaders, and the commentators explain that on that statement of our sages in Pirkei Avot, where they say that that's not just a call to the teachers to establish many students, but to each and every single one of us. And so we need to start to think of ourselves as leaders. What does that mean in the real sense of the word? If you think about it, all of us are in contact with other people all the time. In our families, husbands and wives, parents and children, brothers and sisters, friends, communities, work colleagues. We all are influencing one another. And social science shows that human beings are deeply influenced by other human beings. We are influenced by the people around us. When they do things, we are looking all the time to other people for indications of how we should behave. We are profoundly influenced by the people around us. So to be a leader is really to think of ourselves as influencers. And that is a responsibility, because it means we all need to think, how can we be a positive influence on the people around us? What we say influences the people around us in terms of their behavior and even their attitudes. That's why negativity and pessimism is something which is contagious, as is positivity and optimism. And we need to think all the time, what we are saying, how is that influencing the people around us? Is it making them happier, more positive people, or is it bringing them down? That's why the Talmud says, very interesting idea, it says that one should not share gratuitous bad news with other people. Sometimes you have to share the bad news. People need to know if someone's sick or someone has passed away, whatever it may be, because they need to be there to support, and they need that information to help those who are in pain. But sometimes the information has no practical bearing on either the one who's telling it or the one who's listening to it. So why share it? Why bring people down? And so we can spread positivity and a sense of optimism by being positive people who share that positive energy with the people around us. But it's also through what we do, because what we do deeply influences the people around us. and people are looking all the time for indications from us. So let me give you an example. We know that one of the most serious sins in the Torah is the sin of gossip, lashon hara, speaking negatively about another person. And that becomes a real test. So if, say, for example, you're amongst a group of people and it's a social gathering and people start to talk negatively about somebody else, what do you do at that point? Do you join in? Do you laugh at the jokes at the expense of another person? Or do you really say to people, no, we shouldn't be speaking lashon hara? It takes a lot of courage to do that. That's what real leadership is about. Real leadership is about courage. It's about the realization of responsibility, that who we are and what we do influences the people around us, and that it does make a difference, and that people are looking for indications. And that sense of leadership becomes such an opportunity, but also a responsibility. Take in the context of family, and maybe that's where it applies in the most powerful way. When you think of the responsibility of parents to their children, that sense of leadership, the way that parents talk to each other, husband to wife, and from the parents to the children, is it with dignity, compassion, respect, kindness, sensitivity, or is it harsh and negative and destructive speech? And that sends a message, that creates an environment in a family. What are the values that one has in one's home? Are they values which are good? Are they values which are wholesome? Are they values that are part of our tradition? And that children that grow up in a home grow up with a sense of the value system of that home. That is such a heavy responsibility, but an incredible opportunity. But the beginning of that is to recognize that we are leaders. If we began with a question, what is the key to great leadership? Part of the answer to that is a realization that we are leaders, that we are all leaders, and that we need to bear that responsibility with a sense of appreciation for what it is, but also not with a sense of burden, but a sense of opportunity. We can be people who make a difference. We can be people who make this world into a better place.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, remember, all people smile in the same language, so smile at someone today.